we build on the shoulders of giants. And my thought is I spent, I don't know, almost 2 decades doing content. And if I can take that and condense that into maybe a year's worth of video content so that other people can do that in a year and then go further, that just makes me feel good.
Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Craft Podcast. Today, we are joined by a special guest who interviewed me many years ago. And today, I have the pleasure of interviewing him, Mark Register, who is the head of content for Pipeline. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
So, Mark, let's just jump straight into it. What is your craft?
My craft is creating content that is worth using your time towards instead of spending time with your children.
That's a good point because there's just so much content out there. It seems like everyone's a content creator, but when I look at your background, you really, you don't just like talk the talk, you walk the walk. You have been acting, you have been doing photography, video production. Maybe I'm missing a bucket here. What else have you been working on?
The thing that I'm most passionate about right now is watchmaking. And I think that it's always been creating something, and it's spending a lot of time in doing research, then processing, and then creating a product. And I think that with all content creation, be it a watch, be it video, be it written, that it's something which is saving people time and making their time worthwhile in spending, paying attention to what I make.
I was more interested in talking about content, but now you got me hooked on watchmaking. So I have to ask, you mentioned about like going to like a watchmaking school? Are there schools for watchmaking? And what would graduating to school or finishing the classes enable you to do?
Yeah, so the watchmaking schools are really watch repair schools, and they're usually 2 years, and they're free, which is great. But for the realization is in 1973 when the quartz movement came, that watches were obsolete, and there's no point to watches other than just kind of luxury. So they're having a hard time replenishing watchmakers and watch repairers. So I started looking into that, and I also looked into engineering. But ultimately, what I realized is I cared less about the mechanics of the watch, even though I spent probably 7 months breaking watches down, cleaning them, oiling them, putting them back together. But then what I realized is I love just the way that they looked, that it's a fashion thing. And so there's this beautiful blend of kind of engineering design and just decision making. And it's a movie in a little universe. And I started content in making movies and short films and did pretty well with that. And I think that I can now do that by myself with my wife's help, in just making 1,000 different decisions to make a watch.
So I don't know much about watchmaking. I feel like every time I hear about watches, it's like, like a Swiss watch is like the pinnacle, watch. Were you going to go to like a different country, or is it just in like the United States, they're like watchmaking schools?
So the dirty secret about watchmaking is that pretty much everything is made in China, and the Swiss made is essentially 60% of the costs have to be based in Switzerland. So what happens is everything's made in China, it gets shipped to Switzerland, and they assemble it. And because everyone is paid appropriately in Switzerland, that makes up for it. And so basically, even your Swiss watches are made in China. So the question is, was I going to go somewhere else? I'm from Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and actually Lancaster is an accredited Rolex school. And so I almost went there, or potentially in Germany because my wife's from Germany. So I really wanted to go to Glassita.
I learn something new every day, especially when I'm talking with you. So, okay, now I'm satisfied with that. I could jump back to content creation. So, as I mentioned earlier, you've done so many types of content, and there's so many forms today. It's like that are user generated, right? Video, podcast, what we're doing right now, writing. What do you specialize in? Video? What do you specialize in?
I would say educational content. So that means research, processing, and then writing, and then pretty much video for the most part. I've done podcasts, I've done written, but for the most part, it really does stem around research, production, filming, and then producing. So educational news content.
That is interesting. What was the Young Turks? I've heard a little bit about them, but I don't know the whole story.
Yeah. So when I first got into this, I was an actor at Florida State University, and then I ended up becoming a producer for a friend of mine, and we made short films. And the fourth or fifth film that we made won an Oscar. And then Andrew, who is a writer producer, told me that I had to work for Young Turks. So I was, I think, number 7 there in 2011. And so it's a news and politics show. And so coming into that, it was very much a startup. And over the course of 5 years, pretty much I worked there night and day. I slept on Andrew's couch. Thank you, Andrew Napier. And yeah, I did every job. And in the process, by doing every job, editing, producing, writing, hosting, TDing, building studios. I built multi-million dollar studios that I then was able to then hire people to then take over jobs. And so what was nice was because I was working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, that I could do 3, 4 jobs at a time, and I could only grow as fast as I could hire. And so that then became my job for a while, was hiring, and I loved that process. And yeah, so that was a wild ride, and over 5 years, the Young Turks kind of catapulted into, what it is now. But yeah, it's a news and politics show with a bunch of other entertainment shows as well.
So you mentioned a couple of skills slash jobs. You mentioned editing, producing, hosting. Do you think those are like the top three, or is there like a top X, top five? Anything I'm missing from that list?
I think what's nice is that in doing the hiring process, that whatever job it is, that there's an appreciation for it. And so depending upon the show, sometimes it's more of the producer, or it's more of the editor, or it's more of the audio engineer, whatever it is. And so for the Young Turks, what I would say is that the executive producer kind of oversaw the whole thing, and they're the person who kind of makes sure that the tone and the feel of the show is there, the energy. And then beyond that, then the technical director, the audio person is kind of just making sure that everything, runs right. But then the editor, I have a lot of respect for editors, especially when they're given free reign to play more. And so one of the shows that we did was called Pop Trigger. And Pop Trigger was really Tom Hank and I co-created that. And the premise of the show was to talk about dumb stuff smartly. And the way to do that was have really smart people talk about these dumb subjects, but then also visually augment that with visuals, with audio. And so, to your point of like what position is most important, the editor was really the most important person for that. But the editor couldn't be that important if the executive producer didn't really create that energy in that show. And then also then the publisher, the person who makes the thumbnails, who does the titles and tags and description, like no one sees anything unless it's properly published. So in a convoluted way, what I'm going to say is every position is really, really important. And when done well, it's good. But when you have multiple people doing well in those multiple positions, it's really then a great show.
Let's talk a little bit about producer. So I know you mentioned executive producer, but I have to say the word producer, I've heard it used in maybe not like 100 ways, but at least maybe like 10 or 15. Just what do you think about that title? What do you think about that word? What does it mean?
So I'll start with everything that I've done. So with music, the producer is the guy who does the engineering and pretty much everything, producing. If they're not playing the instrument, they're making everything happen. Then with the films, when I was making films for $0 to $2,000, it was everything. It was literally just everything. And then when it got into the $40,000 and $50,000 range, then it became just coordinating everyone and just being kind of the person who is almost the mom on set. And then prior to that, the person just organizing everything. So it's just the person who makes it. And then when it came into more of the digital video, the YouTube stuff, the producer is then more almost kind of the line producer in terms of the movie sets. And they just make sure that things kind of go according to plan. So it depends on what you're doing. Ultimately, the producer is the person who makes it happen. And depending upon the project, they either make it happen from scratch or they help the initial cook's recipe and they follow that and they make it happen, like a line producer.
How did you end up specializing in, I think you called it like educational content? That seems very specific. Is it because you're passionate about it, or you think it's harder to make and therefore you're like a master craftsman?
I mean, I
Uh,
think that's where I am right now. And I'll tell the quick story about how I came to Pipeline was I was going to go to watchmaking school, and I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And then Stephen Ellis called me, Snoop, and we interviewed, I think pretty much when we interviewed 5, 6 years ago with Esports in a Nutshell. And he pitched me, and I was like, I have to do this. And the premise of it is being able to take all the lessons that I've learned, he's learned, Stone Mountain 64 and everyone else, and condense that into something in which that is valuable information. I think my passion is creating content that is worth people's while. And I think most people, especially on YouTube, which I spend a lot of time on, that people want to learn something. They want to understand something. And so I like that. I like learning new things. And as I talk about watches, it's when I first got into watches, the point of it was to pick something that I could reap no financial benefit from, but I could just learn. And so in that process, I just realized like my true passion is learning new things. And us as people, we build on the shoulders of giants. And my thought is I spent, I don't know, almost 2 decades doing content. And if I can take that and condense that into maybe a year's worth of video content so that other people can do that in a year and then go further, that just makes me feel good.
I agree with you completely because I started this project because I wanted to do one thing every year. One year it was like doing like a 100-mile hike. Last year it was getting an esports documentary of which I had like 1,000 hours of footage of, but we just never found the right editors to finish it. But they did it. It was a Herculean task. And this year, podcasts, during COVID got super popular. So I said, hey, maybe I'll give this a shot. So there wasn't really much strategy or thinking behind it. But what we ended up on is, focusing on craft. And this has been my like backdoor way to learn everyone's like 10, 15, 20-year journey. It's actually really amazing because there were a lot of things I thought I knew, but I have no idea. I'm only scratching the surface because maybe I've worked on something for a couple months as a project, or maybe even for a year as like a main thing at a job. But like video production, I'm gonna have there's gonna be things I'm gonna be able to learn from you, and this content is kind of like meta, which is great. It's like it's a way for all of us to learn from the best people, and not just the best people, but like people with cool stories.
A couple things. First off, with the editor for your documentary, when it comes to importance, when it comes to documentaries, look at the editor. The editor is the person who makes that. Beyond that, the reason why I did esports in a nutshell was I was at Young Turks and I pitched esports to Jenk and Steve and all the guys there. And they were like, nah, I don't care. And I was like, but there's still something here. And so what I did was I spent all my free time doing all this research. And what I did is I then condensed it into this 5 minute junket. But then I also realized that I could talk to specialists and I could get more information in a 1 hour interview than I could spending 5 weeks doing research. And so, like you, I think it is one of the most advantageous or efficient ways to learn a new industry or just learn new things by being curious and asking the right people the right questions. And I think that that will get you further than just doing research alone. So I think that this, podcast, meta, pat on the back.
I must have learned it through you. Absolutely. Actually, let's talk about esports in general, because I noticed that after esports in a nutshell, you are essentially working for esports organizations or companies. And to some degree, Pipeline is more streamers, but they're like adjacent areas. Did you get into, let's say, Blitz Esports and Cloud9 and then the Golden State Warriors because you were a fan of esports, or it was like a natural extension after your YouTube show?
It was kind of the goal from the start. The goal with esports in a nutshell was to get the garner the attention of a esports company to say, I like what you're doing. Can you do it for us? And it worked. It just took a little bit longer than I was hoping. And Rick Ling and Jonathan Lin, the founders of Instant Esports, which then became Blitz Esports, reached out to me. And Joanna, Sean, that whole team there are amazing. And before I go any further, Jonathan Lin and Rick Ling created a team of people that was, I think, one of the best work environments that I've ever had in my entire life. So props to them. Moving forward from that, it was great. And it was pure joy of one-upping each other. And what was nice is I knew what I wanted to create and I laid it out for them and I built the studio, I built the team, and it was so wonderful to see it. It was nerve-wracking as well, by the way. When the monitors didn't work for like 2 weeks, it was terrifying because, it was going all in on this studio that, like, if you guys ever watch it, that it's like, it's really cool and impressive, but it was so nerve-wracking in the process. Anyways, it happened good. But the beauty of that environment was everyone there wanted to do great work and continue to do better work, and everyone else inspired the other person. I got to a point there where I then realized that I really wanted to get more access to the players and coaches and more of the people there. And so, as great work that we were doing, I wasn't able to get the actors. It's like making movies without actors. And so I was lucky enough to be able to make my way into Cloud9, and I then had, the team with then the actors. And it was a very interesting experience of, they're not actors. They are not, personalities. They're athletes. Their primary job is to win games. So yeah, it was just a wonderful experience from Blitz then to Cloud9. But I think after a while, I realized that I think at one point we had 32 different content series, and between, I think it was 18 teams and like 11 different games. And I lost count of it. And it was great. And it was wonderful solving the puzzles. But at a certain point, I realized I didn't quite know what else to build from there. And I think that was the joy of my career so far, is that with Young Turks, with Blitz, with Cloud9, I would always get to the point where I would almost purposely build myself out of a job because I wanted to figure out what the next thing was. And so for esports, I don't quite know what else I would do. Like if an esports company called me today, I'd be like, I can build what I already built. I can build what other people build, but I don't really know what the next thing is. And so I guess that's my drug. My drug is figuring out what the next thing is. And yeah, I think watchmaking is one. And then the other is now with Pipeline.
That's so interesting. First, a quick insider baseball question, because I thought that Discord acquired Blitz Esports, but for some reason I keep hearing about Blitz being part of TSM.
Yes. So
okay,
I have to be careful of what I say.
Oh,
I think it's
okay.
public knowledge. I think it's public knowledge of engineering team, pretty much like the core of what Blitz was beyond the content team, except Sharon from the content team went with them, that they all went to Discord. So they got acquired. But then the app itself went to TSM.
Got it. Oh, you know what? Actually, now that we're talking about it, I Googled this, and yes, it's exactly what you said, which is TSM's parent company, which I forgot it was called Swift. Swift acquired the app portion of Blitz Esports.
That makes TSM sense. Is a smart company of buying up a lot of websites and they're very profitable.
They totally are. Okay, so that was the first question. The second thing is more of a comment, which is I really respect that you have a history of basically, we'll just say, getting to the top of your game in a specific area. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to move on because I'm going to try something brand new from scratch. I have to say that takes a lot of balls, because first of all, most people can't even make it to the top of a craft. And then frankly, it takes bravery, especially when you have a family and you have a spouse or whatnot, to say, yeah, yeah, no big deal. I'll just kind of, learn from scratch. And I have to say, it's either like this is just like your personality, your philosophy, or you're a fast learner. But like, how do you think about that? Do people comment to you about this, or is this like news to you, or this is like your plan?
It's weird because there's this dichotomy of almost like not feeling good enough at the same time, like being really good. And with my sister, like my sister is just she's really good at crystallized knowledge, meaning that she can retain information quickly and she does analytics, SEO, really top tier stuff. And so for me, I was like, I want to sing and dance. But that really then got me into the journey of learning and having curiosity. So it's a burden in many ways, and especially it's a burden for people in my life who depend on me because it's a lot easier to have a single career path and know that this is the way. And I don't think that one or the other is better or different. And one of my favorite part about hiring is or was and is that you start to realize that different personalities are just as important as the other. And at first I was like, I want to hire people who are just like, they live, breathe, and sweat this company, and they're just here all day, every day. And you want those people at certain times and in certain positions. But then the people who just show up, do a good job, and leave after 8 hours, I first hated those people. And I was like, oh, they're not me. But then I started to realize and recognize like those are the core, like they keep everything going. And like I love being around those people. And the people who are more like me are pretty insufferable sometimes. So I think the beauty of like my career path is that I appreciate not only my path, but more so I appreciate the other paths almost even more. Like I'm a fan of the person who does one job because they're good at one thing. And an interesting thing that I've seen in every startup is the generalists are the best people to start with. And then you transition into you need specialists. And sometimes the generalists aren't as good. And sometimes they phase out. But the generalists who become good managers or become good leaders or start to specialize in something, they transition into the next phase. But ultimately, as companies grow, you really need specialists. And that's where, I am kind of like a generalist specialist. Um, yeah.
Awesome. Not career related, or maybe potentially career related. For some reason, I have to just talk about this. I get this vibe from you that you are happy. I feel like I just feel like a sense of like happiness, fulfillment, gratitude from you. And I have to say, because sometimes we interview some folks who are like, at the top of their craft, but they still have this, there's like something they want to prove. Also, there's also like a little tinge of like jealousy a bit. It's about like others. I feel like you're just kind of like competing with yourself. Like, why are you so happy? Is it because you're about to have a child? I don't know. What's the deal, man?
No, that's probably the most stressful thing. Hormones are a bitch.
Got
Uh,
it.
thank you. Thank you. I think Mr. Rogers said the hardest thing to do is to receive gratitude and love. So thank you. Uh, every day I meditate, got like 2-3 hours a day. So like that I'm present. So that's part of it. Exercise and all that other stuff. But the other part is I started to realize that the job was not just doing the job and that I had to trust that when I get hired, I'm good at something and I can just do it. The other part is just being the guy who solves problems. And so I enjoy my favorite part about the job is I block out 2 to 4 hours in the morning where I just do work and I say, F off. I don't know if I can curse, but F off. I need to do work. And then after that, it's my job is to be there for other people. And it can be a mix of doing work and being there for other people. But ultimately, business is people. And if you don't understand that, then you're going to fail. But you can be a great engineer and do great work and be in your bubble. And I think that is where, it is a little stressful because I straddle the line between loving being a manager and a leader, but then also loving being a performer. And that's what I try to do. I try to do the first half of my day of being a performer and the second half of my day being a manager or a leader. And just knowing that when when problems come up, it is so easy to just be able to be like, I know it's this person's fault. It's totally this person's fault. They know it's their fault and they're blaming me, but I'm not going to say anything. But instead, just being like, here's a solution. Let's solve the problem. And in hiring and managing, my favorite people that I've ever worked with are the people who just solve problems. So, and they're just, not a-holes. So I try not to be an a-hole. I try to solve problems and I try to do work that is mine as well. And to your point of happiness, maybe a little too raw, but at the Young Turks, I got to the point where I was managing managers and I was so disconnected from doing the work that I was really unhappy because I just wasn't doing the thing anymore. And I saw the shows that I created. I saw, the studio that I built. I saw everything that I did, but I was like, it's not mine anymore. It's theirs. And that's it's like parenting. And like, I don't fully understand, but like, I kind of understand where you hire people better than you, and you have to let them own the things, that you created. And it does become theirs and they do make it better. And to the point in which that it's no longer yours. And that is a very scary feeling. And to wrap this all up of why am I happy? It's being at peace, that knowing that I'm here right now with Pipeline and I love it and I love the people. And I hope that I'm there for a long time. But I know that one day, sometime, that I won't be there by some means. Maybe I get hit by a bus. And the people there are going to do better than me.
Well, there's a lot to say there. My two follow-ups are, one, I remember there was just like training they did at Riot Games, and it was like I don't know, some like HR guru, and he said the difference between modern, and I don't know the year's definition, but the difference between like modern work and how things were done, let's say, I don't know, in the 70s or 80s, is that back then there were people whose sole job was just to manage. But in, just go like the modern age, everyone is kind of IC slash producer plus manager potentially plus leader, because you can lead without managing people. So it's just kind of crazy. We ask so much of ourselves in a modern age, but also I feel like it is also fulfilling because you could scratch different needs and itches. So that's one part. And the second part is, I think you are managing or not managing for the right reasons. And I think that actually causes a lot of stress and pain for a lot of other people, because frankly, the traditional or supposed path is you do really great at your craft as an individual contributor, and you have to manage people to go quote unquote higher and higher. And I think what we've realized and what we've seen, or at least in the companies I've worked with, what I've seen is that that's actually super destructive. So they've created IC paths that get paid just as much. So they don't make management, like management becomes more of a choice, because you could be like a high level IC and get paid like just as much as a manager, only if you think, they're like, you're doing it for the right reasons, like for all the reasons you just said, because management is just a lot of extra work. So anyways, those are just my two takeaways from what you just said.
You're right. And I'll give credit to Steven and Chris, who are leading Pipeline right now. And they've asked me multiple times, they're like, do you want to be a performer? Or do you want to be management? And I was like, I kind of want both. But right now, like, I kind of want to be a performer, like more than management. And so for the most part, like, they've been great of allowing me to be mostly performer, some management, but knowing that, that changes over time, depending upon, the projects and what the company needs as well. And, that's great to be able to be a part of a startup that is that flexible. And I hope that it sounds like there are more companies in modern management that reward both. And it sounds like it.
Great. Okay. Final question for you is this, and this is, I don't know, might be a trick question, maybe, I don't know, but let's say you are a fresh college grad today and you are interested in content creation. I think let's accept already that kind of like your path to get into things, which is just go do it and get recognized. But there's like so many things you could do. Let's say in video alone, you could do live streaming, you could do video on demand, you could do short form, People are finding success on TikTok, on YouTube, on all the streaming services. You could do podcasts. There's just like infinite things you can do. Do you have like a critical recommendation? Beyond like, oh, do what you are best at or most passionate about. Like, what's a good like medium path to success? Like, for example, maybe, hey, focus on video because there's just gonna be a lot more videos out there. Kind of open ended, but what do you think?
So ikigai is, what am I good at? What does the world need? What do I get paid for? Something else, whatever. And the best thing of you achieve ikigai if you do all those things. But the reality is that that's 0.001% of people in jobs. So what I would encourage is do the things that interest you and that you're good at. So like if you're good at mathematics or if you're good at just like engineering, like go do that, because guess what? Engineering, mathematics pay way better than, going on camera and talking about yourself. But if you really love going on camera and talking about yourself, like go do that. And so, part of what I do at Pipeline is, I just got off a mentorship session with one of our scholarship winners and was telling them like how to like manage their time. And for him specifically, I told him that the vlogging thing was really important to him because he wanted to express who he was and help build that connection between his audience. But at the same time, there's like a business side of like, you also, to another scholar, I was like, hey, do more advertising stuff in which that you then spend 2 hours a week to create ads to then garner the attention of different sponsors. And it worked for him. So it's having a lot of different pots in the kitchen or stews, whatever, different irons in the fire. And knowing that just because you're working on something doesn't mean that it's going to be successful. And right now, like my passion thing is watches. And what I expect is failure. And it's not about the success. It's more of like, this is what I do on the weekends. Like when I'm done, like number one priority is Pipeline, my primary job. And then on the weekends, I relax with like doing a fun passion project. And the reason why, if there's ever a chance for that to be successful, like it's because I am just allowing it to be fun. And so with Mark Register and the Change, my band way back when, and check it on Spotify, I knew at a certain point that I wasn't going to be famous. But 20, 50 years from now, I'm going to look back and say, like, I'm proud of this. This was good. And so what I would say is do the projects that make you feel good and accomplished and creative in who you are, and allow those to be fun. And don't let that ruin, don't let business ruin that. Then the other part is do the things that you're good at and what people will pay you for. And over time, I think those things will start to kind of overlap naturally when they need to.
I can't believe it, but I did not know you made music as well. So you have really, who's the guy who plays Wolverine?
Oh, Hugh Jackman. Yeah.
He's like the triple threat, right? Like he sings, he dances, and he acts. So
So
you
I'm a masochist. I auditioned for the FSU BFA musical theater school. I think they allow 4 to 6 people out of like 10,000. I missed that. And the reason why I missed it was I wasn't as good of a dancer, but I knew that. But I wanted to do it because I wanted to get better. But I got into the BFA program for the acting. It was good. Anyways, but yeah, I was almost Hugh Jackman, but not quite.
that's that's amazing. You're just you're full of stories. Okay, Mark, thank you so much for your time today, and good luck with everything.
Thank you.